Alright, the first thing you want to do in performing your trigger upgrade is to make sure that the trigger cable is disconnected from the cylinder. The second thing you want to do is to remove the airbag and open the airbag compartment. On the top of the pack there's a piece of Velcro. Pull the Velcro back. You'll see the breakaway zipper. There'll be an opening in the zipper. Pull apart at the opening. The whole compartment will come apart and you can remove the airbag. Once the airbag is unpacked, flip the pack over and locate which side your trigger is on and unzip the sleeve. You'll see that the trigger is connected by a screw through a piece of webbing loop. You'll want to take the screw out with a Phillips head screwdriver. So once the screw is removed and the trigger is disconnected from the webbing loop, you can turn the pack over. And you'll want to take note of how the trigger cable is set up in the airbag compartment. You'll notice that the trigger cable is routed behind the airbag components and then down into the main compartment. So first you'll want to just take the end of the trigger out of the main compartment. Then you'll flip it back over and pull the trigger handle, and the trigger cable will come through the shoulder strap. You may need to turn it back over and guide the end of the cable out, but it should come out pretty easily. So once you've removed your old trigger, you'll want to install your new trigger. Just so you know the difference between the two, if you get confused, the old trigger has an E-clip on it. The new trigger has a hex crimp. So you'll want to discard the old trigger and install the new trigger. Now we're going to install the new trigger into the Float 32. This process is the same for our newer model packs, which include the Float 22 and the Float 22 throttle. After this, I will show you how to install the new trigger into the Float 36 and the Float 18. So to begin installation, you'll start with the trigger housing. You'll put it up the shoulder strap, feed it as so. To make this process easier, you'll want to loosen the load lifter. So you'll feed it to the top of the shoulder strap here. Then you'll flip it over. The trigger housing comes through this hole into the airbag compartment. You'll want to route the trigger cable behind the airbag components. So you'll start by putting it under the ejector and then through this part of under this part of the airbag. Pull some excess slack. You'll then want to route it into the main compartment and under this Velcro panel here. So what you'll do is put it through this hole and under the panel. You can confirm that it's under the panel by lifting it up. You'll see the housing there, and then you can pull the rest of it through. So once you've routed your trigger housing into the main compartment, you'll want to reconnect the trigger to the shoulder sleeve here. So you'll notice there is a webbing loop right here. The screw that's attached to the cable is going to go through this webbing loop. So you can easily remove the screw by hand like so. To make this process a little bit easier, you can use your screwdriver to open up the webbing loop, and then you can install the screw, making sure that the screw does go through the actual loop. This is how you install the new trigger into the Float 18. You'll begin by inserting the trigger housing up the shoulder sleeve all the way to the top of it. You'll notice a slit right here in the top of the shoulder sleeve. It's easier if you kind of put your finger there and push the housing through the hole. Pull up a little slack. You're then going to insert the housing down through the center hole, the same hole that the ejector goes through. So it'll be right next to the ejector. You'll put it down there. Again, it'll go right next to the ejector. Into the main compartment here. So you'll pull a little bit more slack. It's okay if the trigger cable sits freely in this pack. So once you have the trigger cable pulled all the way through, you'll go ahead and flip the pack back over. Reinstall the screw. Again, to confirm that it is installed correctly, you want the trigger cable to be stationary, attached to the loop, and then the trigger to move independently. This is how you install the new trigger into the Float 36. You'll start by routing the trigger housing up through the shoulder strap. Again, loosening the load lifter can help. Just feed it through until you see it come into the main compartment, into the engine compartment. Pull the slack through. Route the cable along the side of the pack and then along the bottom across to where the cylinder will be. Then to install the trigger onto the shoulder strap, remove the screw and put it through the webbing loop, making sure that the screw does in fact go between the webbing loop, and then reattach the screw. To confirm that the trigger has been installed correctly, you want to make sure that the cable is attached to the loop and is stationary while the actual trigger moves independently.